Hello my friends, welcome back to my channel. Today I have some recommendations for you with romances with my favorite strong heroines. So I have been thinking about doing this video for a while, and I wanted to try and get more of a mix of books for this recommendation video. The biggest thing that all of these romances have in common is that they all have really strong heroines in them, and I feel like I consider their strengths to be very different. Some of them, not necessarily all of them, are strong. Probably there's only one of them who is like physically strong on this list. The others just have really strong, like a lot of inner strength. They really are going after what they want. They're determined. Like, they have all of these attributes that I love and look up to in women, and I just loved all of these heroines for that reason. Some of them have more domestic strengths, and I feel like that's something that isn't often in strong heroine romance novels, like making a home. I feel like that's a strength too. And so yeah, we're gonna go ahead and get started talking about some of my favorite romances and my favorite strong heroines. So the first one that I wanted to talk about is also one of the most recent books that I have read, and that is The Kingmaker by Kennedy Ryan. This series was fantastic. I just barely read this and I completely fell in love with it. We have Lennox, who is the heroine in this story, and she has Native American heritage, and she is trying to protect her ancestors' land from being developed and ruined, basically, from her ancestors. And she's at a protest when she meets Maxim, who is the son of the CEO, who is out to, I guess, take the land and use it for business and not necessarily for what the Native American people would prefer that it to be used, since it's their land. So they meet at this protest, and they don't necessarily know that they are on opposing sides. Like, she doesn't know that he's the son of sort of like her sworn enemy, so they definitely have a little bit of a star-crossed lover vibe there. But I really feel like the thing that I loved so much about Lennox in this book is how she was never like abrasive in going after what she wanted, but she also never stood down at all. She was so focused on doing what was right for her people and for the world and for society and for herself. She was driven to get those goals and to make sure that nothing got in her way of that. Like, she was a woman who really stood by her principles and her vision for what she wanted in the world to be like for her people, and I honestly loved and admire her so much. She's one of my favorite heroines that I've ever read. This romance is so great too, because you get to see Lennox, the hero, not Maxim, the hero, really never ever force her to sort of cave and force her to not get to use her strengths. And I feel like that's something that makes these romances so special for me, is that we get to see the hero really stand back and never try and change, the heroine, but always sort of watching them grow and encouraging them and helping them, even though at times maybe it puts them in danger or things like that. Like, they always are just so completely respectful, and I love that so much. She's one of my favorite heroines, and I absolutely love this book. Another book that I cannot not include on this is The Prince of Broadway by Joanna Shupe. This book, this heroine, Florence, is such a complete, fierce woman, and I just love her so very much. I've talked about this in quite a few of my videos. It made my best of the year list on 2020. So let's get into it. So this is a historical romance. It is set in New York. It is in the Gilded Age setting, and it follows Florence, who is basically a New York debutante. She's very wealthy. She comes from a very wealthy family, very privileged family, but she feels very confined by the expectations of her and marrying and all this other stuff. She wants to have her own life and not be forced to marry. She has a dream of opening a casino that is only for women, and so because that is her dream, she sets out one night to find Clayton, who is the owner of New York's most successful casino, in the hopes that he will give her lessons for how to run a casino for women. So this woman, like Florence, she was just incredible. She was so I particularly loved her because, especially in this time period, she's really fighting to get outside of those boxes that society wants to put her in, that her father wants to put her in. She's determined to make her own choices for her life, and the hero, Clayton, never, ever, ever tries to take her agency away from her. He always just, it is so beautiful to watch how he steps back and lets her build her dream. And also, like, in particular, there's this moment in here where he gives her a gift, and it is just such a perfectly beautiful gift for who she is and what she likes, and it's not anything that would be considered like a typical gift that you would think a woman would want to receive. It was just so beautiful. But she was the type of heroine that I just immediately connected with and want to grow up to be like. She was wonderful. I loved this book. I think it was fantastic. 5 stars. Okay, the next book that I have is All Scott and Bothered by Kerrigan Byrne. This is another one of my favorite historical romances of all time. This follows Cecilia and Ramsay. She's really had a rough childhood, and she ends up being rescued by a benefactor who tells her that she has inherited this gambling den, and I guess a den of iniquity, for lack of a better word. She's inherited this, and so she takes Cecilia out of this really terrible childhood that she's in and starts raising her and gets her ready to be able to run this gambling den. But so years pass and she grows up to be a young woman, and she ends up meeting Ramsay, who is the Chief Justice at the time and is tasked with making sure that whoever is running this gambling den is brought to justice and to sort of squash it into dust. Now, there is a reason that Cecilia is also running this gambling den that is sort of below the surface, that is really sort of a noble and very admirable reason. She's trying to rescue women who are really struggling, but that is a secret that people don't really know. So she's really fighting to keep a hold of her business. When she meets Ramsay, they have this instant spark and connection. Ramsay is completely taken with her, and he is very much an alpha hero. Like, he is such an alpha, and I feel like that's something that I particularly love in romances, is when we have a really strong heroine and an alpha male too, and watching him really sort of not necessarily bend, but step back and let her be strong and not try to force her to do things that she doesn't want to do. I love it so freaking much. So Cecilia she's just so strong. But the thing that I particularly love about Cecilia especially is that even though she's had such a rough childhood and she's really had sort of a hard life, she never lets that harden her. She's still very nurturing and very loving, and she really sees the good in other people. She has a young girl who is her ward that she's taking care of, and she has a lot of really mothering instincts and nurturing instincts that I feel like are just really beautiful and really adds to her strength. But I've particularly also loved how Cecilia just never backs down from the things that she believes is right, no matter what is happening. Like, she is going to do what's right, what she believes is right for her business and for these women, no matter what. And I loved it so much. And again, watching this big, strong alpha male Ramsay just completely melt only for her and be soft only with her, it was just my favorite thing in the entire world. I loved it so much. Okay, the next book that I have is The Viscount Who Loved Me by Julia Quinn. This has probably my favorite heroine that Julia Quinn has ever written. I really, really love Kate in here. This is the second book in the Bridgerton trilogy, in the Bridgerton series, and this follows Anthony, who we meet in The Duke and I. He is the oldest Bridgerton, and he is basically the man of the house, and since his father died. Anthony has a lot of issues with love and marriage, and he knows that he has to marry and have an heir so that he can, for the Viscount line, but he is convinced that he's never going to marry for love, and so he seeks out a woman that he can see himself being married with, but that he won't necessarily fall in love with, because he doesn't want her to go through the pain of what he saw his mother go through when his father passed away. So he sees a young woman who he thinks is going to be the perfect match for him. But he sort of has this moment where he's caught off guard and meets this young woman's sister instead, Kate, who is just a complete fireball, completely strong, gives him everything that he gives her. Like, they verbally spar back and forth all the time, and she never ever just puts up with his crap. Like, she's constantly just giving for everything that he is giving to her. it's just so fantastic, and I really loved their love story. I think she was the perfect match for him, and she was just so strong and feisty, and I just adored her so much. Okay, the next book that I have to recommend is Take a Hint, Danny Brown by Talia Hibbert. This is one of my favorite romances of 2020. I loved it so very much, and a lot of that has to do with Danny Brown, who is the heroine. She is such a strong, wonderfully imperfect but just so powerful woman, and I loved her so freaking much. So Danny Brown is a teacher, and she's a very educated woman. She's also a bisexual, and she also is like a witch. That has sort of an aspect in this book too. But she's also really not interested in a love match. Like, she just wants to casually date people. And so she's very independent, very strong, really knows what she wants, and is not going to let anything get in the way of that. So when she meets Zafir, who, well, they're already friends when they meet. He's the security guard at her school, and they have this friendship where he brings her a protein bar, like, every day, and it's just freaking adorable. But they end up having this run-in where there was a, like, a gas drill at the school, and she ends up being stuck in the elevator, and Zafir saves her. And video of that goes viral, and they end up being this huge internet famous couple, and they decide to have a fake relationship with that because of how good the publicity is for Zafir's nonprofit. So Danny in particular is strong in a way that I feel like is sort of common for a really strong woman in a romance to have, and that she's got all these walls around her, and she's not really allowing herself to have love that she, in a relationship, that's why she sticks to casual relationships. So I feel like the thing that I particularly love about Danny that makes her a really memorable, strong heroine for me is watching her sort of allow herself to get past that and to sort of push those walls down that she had set up for so long, that she's not going to love or feel anything. And I feel like there's a lot of strength in her when she allows herself to see love as a possibility in her life and sort of open up to Zafir in that way. I thought it was just so beautiful, and I think she's a fantastic character, and this is one of my favorite romances because of her. This list would not be complete if I didn't talk about A Heart of Blood and Ashes by Milla Vane. This has one of my favorite female heroines of all time. I think that she is absolutely fantastic, and I just adore everything about her. This book is a barbarian romance, so it's in a high fantasy setting, and we have Maddox and Yvain. They're both from, like, opposing kingdoms that are warring with one another. They end up meeting when Maddox finds out that his parents have been killed, and he believes that Yvain is responsible for the death of his parents. But actually, her father was the one who was responsible and set her up for that. And so she wants to make a deal with Maddox to have a marriage and have a child so that they can take the throne or the kingdom away from her father, because she has such a grudge against him. Yvain in this book is so physically weak and broken. Like, you can see that she has been through so much. But the thing I love about her more than anything is how all of that brokenness and all of the trauma that she has been through, it never once diminishes her strength and her spirit, and how driven that she is to make her father pay, but also to get the justice that she feels like she's deserved. And Maddox is such a strong, and again, it's just a strong alpha hero who really is kind of terrible to Yvain, and she does not, like, falter at all when he is being rough with her, when he is kind of being terrible with her. She is so strong just the whole way through, and I feel like she is such a fabulous example of a strong heroine in a fantasy, especially when it seems like a lot of times in these fantasies, in this type of world, we would expect Yvain to be this warrior, this fierce woman who fights and battles, and she's not. Her strength is completely inside and who she is, and I just loved her so freaking much. I loved how she didn't let Maddox get away with anything, and later on in the book, she was not going to let him get away with anything, and she was going to make him work for it, and I love her so much. She is a fantastic heroine. And again, this list would not be complete if I did not have a Beverly Jenkins book on here. The one I picked was Forbidden. This is one of my favorite Beverly Jenkins books. I love this book so much. This is the story of Ryan and Eddie. Ryan is the hero, and he has black parentage, but he's white passing. At this time in the story, he is presenting as a white male, So society believes him to be white. He has all of those privileges at the time. This is an American historical. So Eddie is a black woman. She is a free black woman, and she is trying to make her way in a society that is not making that hard for her. She has a dream of opening a kitchen. She's a wonderful cook. I feel like every time I read a Beverly Jenkins novel, I just am salivating for like really good home cooking. And this book in particular, Eddie, she's such a great cook. And she has this dream of opening a kitchen. She's traveling across America to California is her goal, to open her restaurant with basically just a cook stove and a few personal items. On her way, when she's traveling, she's sort of accosted by this man who tries to force himself on her. And when she will not cave into that, he leaves her stranded, basically in the desert. Ryan is the hero, and he finds her and brings her back to his place and nurses her back to health. And their love story was just so freaking beautiful, and I loved it so much. There was so much longing and just a truly beautiful love story with these two that I just adored so much. But the thing in particularly I love about Eddie is how she has had so many setbacks. Like, she was left to die in the desert, basically, and as soon as she was up and ready to walk around again, she was like, okay, time to go to California and pursue my dreams. Like, she was so driven to accomplish what she wanted to accomplish. She wasn't going to let anything stand in her way, and I just loved how she was so strong and she stood up for what she believed in, and just was such an example to me of never giving up, and I just loved her so much. She's one of my favorite heroines. And the next book that I have is Kiss of a Demon King by Kresley Cole. This is part of the Immortals After Dark series, and I am a huge fan of this series. They're all paranormal. They have different kinds of creatures, werewolves, vampires, demons, witches, everything basically. So this book follows Sabine, who, if you are a fan of Immortals After Dark, you probably have seen her in previous books, or you know her and you know what a complete badass she is. I just freaking love Sabine. I think she's one of my favorite heroines in this entire series. So this book follows Sabine and Rydstrom, and they are sort of at odds with one another. Sabine is trying to have the baby of Rydstrom because it's going to be this all-powerful supernatural creature. And they really do not get along one bit. And Sabine has led a very sort of painful life. She's had a lot of things that she's had to deal with. She's had a lot of denial in her life where she has denied herself things to promote this cause for this thing to happen. I know I'm being super vague, but she's a sorceress and she is so powerful, and she is just such a complete, dedicated woman to her cause and what she believes to be true. And I also really loved watching, I think this is something we can kind of agree on that I really love, is watching these really powerful alpha type personalities find the person who they love and that they kind of decide is the one who's worth risking for or worth softening for, but it's only for them. And I felt like she was such a great example of that in this book, because that is exactly what she did with Rydstrom. I just loved it so much. She was fantastic. Okay, the next book that I have to talk about is Culty by Mariana Zapata. I freaking love this book so much, and one of the main reasons that I love this book so much is because of Sal, who is the heroine in this book. Sal, oh Sal, I love you so much, Sal. You are one of my favorite heroines ever. I just love her so much. This book is about Sal, who is a professional soccer athlete. She is really at the top level of her game and is just doing this amazing professional athlete life. She ends up having an opportunity to be coached by Rainier Culty, who is basically like the soccer star of her childhood. She had posters of him in her room and she just loved and adored him. So he is definitely a completely grumpy, jerky hero to her at first. This is enemies to lovers too. And the thing that really made me love Sal is just how she, even though like she worshipped this man and had this huge crush on him and she admired his athletic ability and everything, and he's her coach, so she's got all that, when he gives her crap, she does not put up with it. Like, she fires right back to him. She does not let him talk down to her. She calls him out on his crap. She is 100% not letting him get away with his bad behavior, and I freaking loved it. There's this moment in here where he kind of goes after her dad, who is a huge fan of Culty, and Saul just like puts him in his place and is like, don't you dare treat my dad like that, who is one of your biggest fans. And I'm just like, yes, girl. I love this book. I love the romance, but it's such a slow burn romance, like, slow burn? You know if it's Mariana Zapata. But, like, Saul made this so enjoyable because she was just such an endearing character, but she was so very strong, but she had vulnerabilities too. I loved it so much. She's one of my favorite heroines of all time. And the last book that I have to talk about today is, of course, The Raycast by Scarlett Peckham. This was one of my top 10 books of 2020. I absolutely love and adore this book with my whole heart and soul. And one of the main reasons I love it so much is because Serafina, who is the main heroine in this book, oh, Serafina, I love her so much. So this book is another historical romance, and it's based on the gender-swapped role of a rake. So she is the rakess, so she's basically a female type of Playboy character. And she has had a really tragic backstory. What kind of led her to be the woman that she is today, led her to be the Raycast, where she was ruined in her youth, and she ended up paying the price for that and has basically been shunned by society, and the man who ruined her was not. And she feels like that is such a great injustice. She sees that for what it is at the time, that she decides to devote her life to trying to even out the equality there between men and women, and not just letting men be able to do whatever they want and ruin these women, and the women being the only one who pay the price for it. I just loved so much how strong and capable she was, but I loved also how, even though she had like some really kind of scary things and she really faced a lot of hardships for living that ruined life and living it proud, that she never backed down from what she believed in. Like, she believed in so strongly in women having equal rights as men that it was just a thing of beauty. She also was another woman who sort of doesn't believe in love and doesn't want to have any love, but she's very attracted and drawn to Adam, who is the hero in this story, who is a widow with young children. They have this wonderful first meeting, and they have a lot of chemistry and a lot of sparks. And the book basically revolves around their very gradual, slow, sometimes heartbreaking, but also beautiful love story. They do get a happily ever after in the end. I feel like Scarlett Peckham has described this book as being melancholy but ultimately joyful, and I would say that is absolutely true. It's just a completely beautiful book, and I love Serafina so much. She's one of my favorite characters of all time. So there we have it. That is my list of some of my all-time favorite strong heroines in romance novels. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you know of a really strong heroine in a romance novel that you think that I would enjoy that isn't on my list, please let me know down below. I would love to know that. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in my next video.